for coming today. We are very excited to have our guest speaker, Dr. Rob Reynolds. He's the CPO for NextThought. And I do want to add that he's brought a couple of his crew here with him today, John and Peggy. So we are happy to have them here as well. And John has made some scones, apparently from scratch. Yes. So you have to try them.
My specialty for the team. So I make them for the team. I thought it was going to work out. Here we go.
We very much appreciate that. We will, this is a special 2-hour session today, but you don't have to stay. I understand you have classes and such going on, but if you can't stay, that is great. We will have a break around 2 o'clock, so you can get up and go to the bathroom and have some more dessert or seconds, whatever you do. So, and then at that time, I will have a couple prizes. We'll draw for a couple of prizes at 2. But I'm going to let Dr. Dennis Williams introduce Dr. Reynolds.
All right. Well, if you were here last semester, we had Dr. Rob Reynolds out to talk to us about the concept of connected learning. And so you may remember him from that time. We met downstairs in the conference room in the library. Rob is a Ph.D. from the University of Texas and started out his professional sort of academic career teaching modern language and literature, and then moved into the IT area and was the Director of Information Technology at the University of Oklahoma, and has also worked as an executive for Cengage Learning. So, you know, lots of learning associated kinds of things going on here with technology and, you know, the future. You know, I'm always casting the dour vision of the day when it's actually, you know, Cengage and McGraw-Hill and Pearson who actually run our schools for us, and we just have a few coaches, you know, running the technology for all of those folks. But let's hope that doesn't that far along. But we certainly do need to make sure that we're connected with what technology and learning and all of those things have together. Rob's also founded a startup back in 2004 called Xplana. He's an active author, a blogger, a researcher. If you're on well, I suppose, what is it, LinkedIn. You can certainly see Rob's posts come up if you're a friend with him on various aspects of connected learning and the like. Author of The Future of Learning Content in 2012, and his current position right now is Chief Product Officer at NextThought, which is a ed tech company down in Norman. And the thing that connects Rob and I is, among other things, is I went down to NextThought. Took a look at what they were doing because I forget how actually that recommendation happened, but we discovered that Rob and his boss, Ken, are Church of Christ and have been working with you know, OC and other places to think through how we go about constructing, you know, great online learning platforms and that. And these guys have been really thoughtful and intentional about taking the best practices, the best kinds of technologies, and thinking about how do small Christian liberal arts colleges get to play in this game when we are relatively underfunded compared to our, well, at least up until this year, we're relatively underfunded compared to our state school colleagues. So anyway, I want to turn it over to Rob. He's brought a team with him, and I'll let him introduce his team, and we'll move forward from there. So
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thank all of you, especially those who are here the first time and you didn't veto having me back. So that's I appreciate, because I needed the lunch. So I come here to do the lunches. Peggy Sabatini is here with me. She is on our learning design team, and she will be helping facilitate. We're going to hope you didn't think you were just going to come in here and talk. You came to work, and so she'll be facilitating some of that. And John Hunnell here in the back is works with us in client development and marketing, and then just a whole lot of other stuff too. But he was here when I came the last time, and so as Dennis said. Kind of a long, diverse background in education and learning. Had a lot of different jobs in higher education. Obviously, from a teacher. My first full-time teaching job was at Oklahoma Christian, before I went on to the University of Oklahoma. Have done a lot of things that happen, as Dennis says, in a small liberal arts Christian school. You know, I've led study abroad programs, led mission trips, done those things, and done teaching where it intersects with life, and where it's not just the discipline out here, but trying to make it relevant and personal in a way that's tied to a mission. I've also done that where that wasn't the case. At the University of Oklahoma, you can imagine it was a little bit different. In other places that I've taught. And I've also seen it from a lot of different places. There's been a set from publishing, from different types of universities, from the technology world. For the last 6 months, I've been working with the state regents of higher education here in Oklahoma, leading a very broad initiative in figuring out how they can improve online learning in state universities. And I've been working with 60 faculty and staff and administrators from 20 different universities in working groups to talk about professional development training for faculty. What do they need? What do they want? How do you make it better? Affordable content. How do you make content to where we can lower the cost to students? And about technology tools. What kind of tools should we be using at a state, from a public school perspective? And it's been wonderful, a wonderful experience, because I've had the opportunity to visit so many different campuses, driving out all around the state, being on campuses, talking to people, hearing their stories. How did you become a teacher? Why are you doing this, etc. And I was telling Peggy on the way in, and yet all of that, and I still say this is like one of my favorite places to go. I love this campus, and I'll tell the story. Misty's already heard it, and Laura have too. So when I came here before, I met a young woman who was a student. John and I parked at some neighborhood because I didn't know where to park, and I just figured, okay, not knowing, I'll just find a place. So found a place on the sidewalk somewhere and parked, and met a young woman who was a student and asked for directions to the library. And I wasn't in a place where you just say go that way, right? It was, you got to go there, find this sidewalk, and she gave very explicit instructions. John and I, as trouble as we have without our GPS, but we managed to find it. It was great, very helpful, and it was so friendly. And I thought, wow, what a great advertisement for campus, right? So we leave. We had a wonderful meeting with all of you. We leave, we go back, getting close to the car, and we run into the same young woman. She's leaving. She's been here for class, and she's leaving. And what does she say? She says, oh, now, did you find what you were looking for? And she engaged us in a conversation again to make sure that we got what we needed. Did we need anything else? Etc. I say, well, I got to get better than that. That's what kind of student Southern has. So Peggy and I get here, park in a different place, and we're coming over, and I'm kind of remembering where the library is. Again, we couldn't take too many rows to figure it out, but we're coming across, and we run into a young man who's not a student here now, but had been previously years ago, and he's been at some event, and we say, excuse me, could you tell us the library? He said, and he kind of looked around and he said, wait a minute, I'm a little turned around. He said, I've just got here, and I've been here, and it's over here. I think it's that way. And they go, okay, great. So we had a nice little conversation. Start heading off, and I said, we'll find it. I think that's right. And heading out, and he yells after me about 30 seconds later. He says, sir, he yells from a distance. And he's found somebody. And he needed to find something too. He was trying to get someplace. But instead of asking them first where he could go, he found out for us and yelled after and gave us the directions. So again, more, I think, testament to what you're doing here. I think those are great stories, and every time you're telling them, because it says a lot about who you are and what you're doing. It tells me a lot about what you do in your classroom, not just the students you bring in, because we all know you can bring in great students from great homes, and you can not do some great things with them. And obviously, you're amplifying the greatness and making them good people. What we want to do today is talk about how to build good courses. We're going to take one of your courses. We're all going to kind of build it and rebuild it together. As Peggy knows, when we talk with clients, and a lot of times with corporate clients, etc., I tell them we have three options. I can teach you how to fish. I can fish with you, or I can fish for you. If you want me to fish for you, it's very expensive. Because A, I'm not interested, and you're going to pay a paying tax and all that. But the other two are really good options, and all of our work is really about showing you some things about designing and building courses, and then doing it with you and giving you a process so that anyone can do it, because it's not hard, whether it's online or in class. And my hope is that what we do in here will translate to any environment. We're going to be talking about an online world history class, but we could be talking about An introduction to religion course. We could talk about a biology class, anything. Everything we do in here will apply to those things. So I think that will be really valuable to you. We'll be very hands-on, and participatory. So I'm going to try to kill a little bit of time at the beginning so people can finish eating, so you don't feel like you're juggling plates and other things. But with that, let me go into sharing, right, Misty? And
Right there.
and
First one, entire series.
first one, there we go. That's right. And so I got to share, right?
Mhm.
And then I'm back.
And then you use minimize this whole screen.
I love the infinite.
Yeah.
Into infinity and beyond, please. All right. Is it here? So we'll go through a couple of things. We've done some introductions on our side. I'm going to have you go around real quickly and tell me who you are, what you teach, what area you work in, what you do, and then we're going to get into learning about the process, and then we'll get into the work with a little reflection along the way. So let's start. I'm going to step back, and those of you from Southern Nazarene, just go around and tell me who you are and what you do here. That would be helpful. That will help us as we facilitate. Misty, I'll start with you.
I'm Misty Foster. I'm an instructional designer, and I teach the online teaching course here.
Awesome.
Lou Denard, I am in graduate studies in management. We have a master's programs in business.
Fantastic.
Alan Young, and I'm the sociology professor.
Sheila Stout, I'm the division chair for cultural and communication studies.
Tamara Dawson, I'm the program director for our business administration degree completion programs.
Super.
Mike Parker, I'm an adjunct professor in fine arts and in communication.
Don Dunnington, teach Bible and theology in our School of Theology and Ministry.
Great.
I'm Melody Castleberry. I'm adjunct in human resources in the graduate program, and I'm an SNU grad.
Oh, super. Welcome.
I'm Brandon Montgomery. I teach logic and philosophy.
Heather Clemmer, Department Chair of History and Gen Ed Director.
Eileen River, I teach missions and theology.
Dennis Williams, I'm the Dean of Teaching and Learning and a historian.
Lynn Hackford, English.
I'm Ron Titus. I'm visiting from across the
Hi, welcome, Ron. Good to see you again. Laura.
I'm Laura Cook, and I work here in the Online Resource Center, and I also teach for the BSD program online.
Oh, terrific.
Congratulations.
I'm sorry, Miss.
You can leave now.
We're not inclusive, but that's what.
I got you covered.
I'm Jason Coles. I teach in the Department of Kinesiology.
Okay, great.
Harlan Johnson, also in the Department of Kinesiology.
Oh, fantastic.
That's why we're left out.
We have our online people.
Oh, thank you, Misty.
And we have Tara Cole. She does communication. And she actually has been an adjunct for us for a while, but now she's at OSU IT. And we have Jeff Seifert, and he's the Assistant Director of Graduate Studies and Management.
Okay.
And we do have Steve Klaus. He's also an adjunct instructor, I believe, for the MBA program. And anybody else?
Maybe Kirk Jackson.
I don't think he's online right now.
But you can check out.
Oh, Delilah is online.
No.
Delilah Joyner. And what does she teach? You know?
She's program director for FSG.
Okay. SSG. Yep.
We have a stage gerontology for the non-initiated.
Thank you.
Translate.
And welcome to all those of you online and everybody else. So we're going to start with a little bit of self-reflection. It always helps to kind of contextualize where each of us is at. I know you all came to this different perspective, carrying different baggage as we're on this journey with you, and baggage in a good way, not a bad way here. And doing that, so what we want to do is start with the moment of kind of reflection around that. And to do that, we're going to do a little exercise. I want each of you to think, nobody may have told you how to think when you came, right? But we'll think a little bit about your most memorable learning experience, good or bad. Is memorable. So I want you to kind of, I'm going to give you a second because you kind of, some of you have several you can think through, and it doesn't, we're not going to go back to your history and figure out if that really was it, but think of one that's really memorable if you're most you can, and think about the qualities of that. Why is it memorable to you? And it's probably memorable because of the experience that you had, and I want you to think in terms of experience, not necessarily what you got. It's probably not, it could be memorable because you learned these 10 things, but a lot of times our experiences, really, it's that experience that we had that made it memorable, good or bad. And I want you to think about that. If you have something to write on, I think it's helpful or to type on, or you can do it in your head. If you do,
Right on the back of that worksheet.
Yeah, you can write it back on a worksheet. I think it's helpful just to jot down a note or two, just to kind of process through it a little bit and think about what did make that so memorable. You can write down just 3 things. You don't have to have 3. If you have 1, that's 2, 2 or 3. If you have more, that's fine too. What made that so memorable? Was it a person, something that they said? Was it the process, the environment? I'll give you a couple of minutes here to go through and think about it. It doesn't have to be a big thing either, right? And of course, one of mine, the one I would share, is a small kind of intimate moment with a teacher, but it really wasn't about a class. It still stands out to me after all these years. So. All right, so I'm going to give you one more second on finishing up here. A couple of things you're thinking about. Memorable experience, what made it memorable for you? Why does that experience stand out? And that's pretty easy once you kind of walk in on something. You kind of bring your perspective to it and go, yeah, that's why that was. All right, so we won't go around everybody, but I will ask if a couple of people want to share a couple of theirs out loud with the rest of the group, so we can kind of just get some perspectives and see what people are, what those experiences might have been.
Again, I remember like freshman, sophomore year, University of Illinois, huge lecture halls, whatever, and walked into my first intro to sociology class. And this particular professor had the habit, he'd come in early and he'd always write the outline for the day on the edge of the blackboard what he was going to cover. And I was not experienced with professors doing this, and it was like, wow, I can actually follow where he's at, where he's going, and it made it way easier to learn. And so thinking back on that, I ended up as a sociology major. The guy eventually ended up being one of my advisors on my Ph.D. dissertation. I found out years later that he'd won like a bazillion teaching awards. I had no idea. And in a lot of ways, the way I teach using outlines is actually kind of modeled after him.
Wow. Memorable and impactful, right? That's awesome. What else? What was memorable about your experience that jumps out?
A major conflict with a close colleague came to mind.
I'm really sorry about that.
I have no idea. But it was a major conflict with a close colleague. And it was in the context of our working through that particular conflict that I came to a deeper insight of the importance of the perspective of the other and how easy it is for me sometimes to just go over the insights of the other and fail to look at something in a complete kind of way.
What a great lesson. That's awesome. I love that. What else? Something some experience you had, something that was memorable about it too.
You might appreciate this. I remember coming out of high school that I thought that like math and sciences had absolutely nothing to do with like English and literature, and that was a big dichotomy in my mind. Right. I remember in a seminary class actually, I took a linguistics class, and they talked about a guy named Chomsky. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, it all joined together. I could see the big picture of how this really had to do with this other thing. I thought there were two worlds, and you were in one world or the other. And when I took that linguistics class, I remember thinking, I see the big picture now of it all. And that was really probably the most enlightening class moment I can
That's
imagine
great.
taking that linguistics class.
This idea of grand unified theories
Yeah.
really exists, and
I
who
really-
knew that I was already in the middle of it?
Yeah, I didn't know that.
You're not on the outside looking in, you really, that's really cool. Yeah, that's a great moment, like, aha,
Yeah.
I belong, yeah.
It was a admissions class I had to take at seminary of all things, and that's
Yeah,
when I took.
that's cool, that's great, yeah. I love it. One more, somebody else have one thing they want to share about
I
that?
can remember a teacher that somehow turned on the light that I was a student and that I could be a successful student. And so I've been a student for the last 50 years. I've never left school since then, but that person who was able to take someone who didn't have much confidence as a learner and convince me that I was a learner and that I could be successful at it.
I love that, yeah, exactly. Process, every time I hear one of these, I start thinking, oh, I've had that experience. And that's kind of why I wanted you to share and to think about, because what we're going to do in the learning, in our design process is, we want to take all of those memorable things, the good ones, and that should go into every course that we do. Now, it can translate in many ways. Don't we all want to have a course in every course that we teach that is about dealing with collaboration, but real collaboration with friends, colleagues, et cetera, is working through things. We're not always going to agree, and I think we all know that happens, especially in our families, not necessarily just in our families. It happens in our churches. In fact, the more we like each other, it seems like sometimes it's harder to be honest and to do that. And don't we want to teach that? Don't we want to have the light bulbs go off? Don't we want to let people know that where they are matters and they are part of this big thing? They're not on the outside. All of those things, that this way that information can be presented can actually have an impact on my life, and I can learn a process for doing things better that will be more meaningful, and I'm making connections here that matter. It's not just a throwaway thing. That's part of this is, there's two purposes, and I'll talk about one of them in a second, but part of the reason we want to do this is to give us some general context. I want to tell you about a language, speaking of linguistics, a process that we use for talking about redesign is we're using a simple visual language. It's a design language. We do this because it lets you work with sticky notes and cards. We may be talking about online courses. We're not going to really do anything online other than see this. We want to get back to very visceral, basic, anthropological things of doing things where we're all comfortable, regardless of our experience. We find that we tend to think better if something else isn't getting in the way, and then we can do it collaboratively. And also to make it simple. One of the things we tend to do, exercises like the one we just did, remind us how simple it can be. As we get into it, it becomes very complex to us sometimes in the delivery and how else it's going to work together. And by using a simple language, we can keep it very simple. And we'll say this, I think some big things come out of that. So some of you have worksheets in front of you. If you don't, you can check with someone, there's someone that does. We didn't realize there were going to be quite as many. We didn't make copies for everybody. I apologize. This is all available online. And Misty has the deck, and there's actually a link on the initial slide, Misty, that is a link that actually takes you to the site where this is. This language was invented by a professor at the University of Central Oklahoma, with which NextThought partners. We're getting ready to announce the formation of a new center at the under the auspices of UCO called the Center for what am I just facing as I live? The Institute, I was thinking center, but it's Institute. The Institute for Learning Environment Design. I'm pretty good guy. And it's a partnership between NextThought and UCO to take this and apply learning design for all kinds of things. This language can be used, I'll talk about it in a minute, for designing buildings and learning spaces. It can be used for courses. We use it for organizational design and management, and you'll see how that works. Some of you keep up with news and higher education, or just general interest news. The case of Missouri, the University of Missouri in the fall, and the issues they had. I'm a sociology professor, you're well aware of that, and the race tensions and the things that happened. And now sociology professor, sociology was just fired.
No, don't blame us. Communication.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to lay communications on you. I apologize.
Yeah, that was
okay. That was unfair. All right. But so all of this. The issue, I happen to know through a business arrangement, the person who was the former president there, assistant president, who had to resign. Not knowing him well, but I've been with him and been in meetings and spent time with him. And the problem that they faced, among other things, was an environment design problem. It was a communication and feedback everything problem. we could map that with this language. So it's a very versatile thing. And it really has 5, we think we can break down any learning experience into 5 things. So we figure we can all kind of work with that, and that's why it's simple. We're talking about information, always presenting some information or using information in some way. You can think about your own teaching and how this works. There's usually dialogue. Now, dialogue can be something, with us talking, that can be dialogue. It can be one-on-one. It can be a discussion group. It can be small groups, whatever. It could be brainstorming, project-based. That can all be a type of dialogue. Feedback is when we're getting feedback either to the learner, and it could be as simple as I'm giving you feedback on a paper you turned in. That's feedback. You get a grade on an exam, that's feedback. Feedback can also come informally. One of the least mined resources in all of our education is how to make sure that students are getting lots of informal feedback. Because informal feedback has high value but low risk. Formal feedback tends to have high value but kind of high risk. So if I'm giving feedback on an exam or a paper, it can be really valuable, but also it cannot be heard sometimes because it has high risk with it. Whereas low risk feedback can be pretty bad. So how do we, and that looks different in different spaces, but it can be simple side conversation, hallway conversations. It can be peer-to-peer conversations, all of those things. It's one of the reasons in English, it's one of the reasons we use in English. We do a lot of peer editing and things because we know statistically that if it's just me doing 6 exams a semester with the drafts and me as the professor giving that feedback in my red pen with all of that stuff and telling the wrong word here and subject-verb error here, that they don't get better. The resistance to the feedback is pretty high. Some do, but most of them don't. They learn what they're supposed to do it well, but they really don't improve very much because there's such a high resistance to the feedback because it's so risky. And so feedback is important. Lots of ways to do that. We also use this symbol that says feedback for self-reflection. Reflection is important. So it's not just getting feedback, but it's also feedback to yourself. That's reflection. There's practice. So in any environment, we're giving information, we want dialogue, we have this notion of feedback and reflection, and we have practice. And again, that writ large, right? That can be anything from a little activity we just did. Think of your most memorable, that was a practice of sorts. We can do a worksheet, go home and do actual practice activities of all those things. And then finally it's evidence. And evidence is what we would normally think of is something more summative that we have as an exam, a paper, those are things. You now are providing evidence that you've learned something. And that's one we all agree is probably the trickiest thing in teaching because I think, and if all of us who've been at it for a long time wonder how valuable is some of the evidence, what we've called evidence, and what is it really measuring? Are we measuring it accurately? Is that really a good evidence of what they can do? And it's hard, and it's hard in every discipline. And sometimes we think it's easier because I'm teaching math, and it's pretty quantitative and it's simple and I can do it. But we'll all agree when we talk to math teachers, in fact, and we get in math education, that there's a difference between memorizing some formulas and actually knowing math, learning it, and being able to do something with it. So a lot of our early evidence was really bad evidence. So now can you work with math in the real world? That's better evidence. But how do we build those types of evidence? So that's that's all there is to know. That's all you have to know to be able to design and redesign courses. 5 things. And it's really about how we shape these and how we coordinate them. So we kind of guide ourselves. And I'll give you what we think are some best practices. And again, these slides are available through Misty, so they're for your use. If you take notes if you want, if you just want to grab the slides from her and go through them at length later. And my email is on the end of this, and certainly Dennis and Misty have all of that. And you can always feel free to reach out to me or Peggy or follow up on any of this. This is a philosophy. I will tell you that it is a personal philosophy about learning and designs, online, hybrid, face-to-face. But our priorities are kind of, we follow a PEACE acronym. It's nice when you come up with 5 things, or 5 things that happen to be able to do that. and go, wow, okay, boy, it wasn't by design.
You spend hours trying to find a word.
Yeah, we did, yeah. We didn't come up with a word and say, what can we
That's
do
always
with
my
this?
favorite.
right?
It was original.
Yeah, exactly. So personalization is one of the biggest struggles in education today. You hear it used a lot. You hear publishers using this. We're going to provide personalized curriculum. We're going to do this. We hear it K-12. We hear it everywhere. What most people mean when they say personalization, especially content providers, is individualization. So when you talk about adaptive learning and adaptive assessments, those are individualized, they're not personalized, and meaning I've got a bunch of information and I'm going to provide special packages of information to you because you fit into a certain type of person to do that. And we can do it low sophistication or high sophistication. Personalization means I know who I am, and somehow that information is being personalized, and I'm participating as the learner in that, and that's inculcating that as some part of my system. That is hard, at least individualization is pretty. That's a numbers and a math game. Personalization takes thought. Now, if you're teaching religion, for example, we had a conversation after last time about some of the difficulty as we define learning, and I have students going in, and it's not just about learning some information, it's about learning something. You want it to be personalized. You hope it's being personalized, and that's a challenge. But that means that they have to participate. So how do we design around that? And so we want to encourage that. Engagement is the second thing. So how do we get learners to really interact in meaningful ways with information and with others? How do we get them to engage? We all know what non-engagement looks like. I mean, we've all, unfortunately, if you're like me, you've taught those classes too. I mean, and not necessarily for lack of effort. It's just like, someday you just want to, maybe if I bring firecrackers to class. Something, right? And sometimes you can't figure out what. I think I did the same thing with both classes. And to help think about engagement, I think of learning, and those of you who heard me talk last time, I think about learning as a learner at the center of a network of a bunch of nodes. Think of these just nodes out there. And engagement means, if the high engagement means I've got them, those are information and people, and I've gotten them to connect to as many of those nodes as possible in their network. I've expanded their engagement, not just with this, but they've made other connections. Like you were talking about, I'm in here, I'm learning this, and all of a sudden, boom. It's because you were able to make the connections with all the other possibilities. And yeah, well, I'm not over here, I'm over there. I got the big picture. That's engagement. Agency, and these are all related. Learners, in successful learning, when we get to where we want to go, take ownership of their learning. If we can't cross that chasm where we're just they're receiving only, to they own it, and are responsible for part of the success, then we're not going to get very far in terms of any kind of enduring or long-term learning. That's just the way it is. So how do we create agency? Now, this is one of the problems that a lot of times our students have when they go get a job. They go out and get a job, and a job demands that you have agency. Because I'm not going to do it for you. I hired you to do this job. Now you own it. You got to do it, and you get promoted if you do it. And are we encouraging that all along the way in our learning? Have we taught them agency in the way that you own? Yeah, you made a C in my my world philosophy class, and you owned it. And in fact, and I think that may not help them. I would actually much prefer a student that got a C that really owned it and did own every piece of that C than who owned nothing and got the A. They will actually do more with it. And you probably have students, or you may have had that experience. The experience has kind of pointed to that. Students who went out and they came back and you talked to them, and you thought they got less, but what they got, and they actually did more with it. And that's because they had agency. Contextualization, and this goes back to the first exercise. We all know, and we'll talk about this world history course, the world history course as it is does a great job of contextualizing information. It says, here's where you are. We never want learners to ask where they are or what they're supposed to do next. We want to know where they are. You are here. So contextualization first is with information. But the piece of contextualization we generally don't do very often is contextualizing the learner, him or herself. So here's where you are with reference to this information, but where are you? So go back to the exercise we just did. And so how do we normally, a lot of times we normally begin something by presenting a concept. That's a very important thing. We said, here's the information you want to learn. And in doing that, I've told you where you are in the course, what's important, giving you the map. That's only half of the battle. If I can't get that learner, that participant, to know where he or she is personally first, even before the concept, relative to why it matters, I have a problem. And the problem is, ultimately, what I'm wanting to measure is learning. And to measure anything, I have to have at least 2 fixed points. And so if I don't know where the learner is at the beginning, I can't tell you where they are at the end. Whether they know 10 things or not isn't learning. That's me. You're hearing me say that. We can have a philosophical or discipline discussion about that. What's learning is, have they internalized, personalized, done it, and can they do something with it, and will they? If they don't do all of it, if I don't know where they are, I don't know where they've gone, how far. So one of the things you'll hear Peggy or me when we're working on this video redesign is talking about, how do we establish that? How do you contextualize them? We did a lightning round. We said, hey, what's something you remember? So we're talking about learning design. Before we did it, we talked about what was, so you all, without realizing, first shared kind of where you are, what's meaningful to you in learning that will help in your design, and then you got to hear a bunch of other people say, and they go, oh, those are some good ideas too, I think I'll write those down. Now, that makes it easier to measure success, because we know where we are. If we go over here, we go, oh, I traveled this far, or I didn't travel very far at all, or I decided to go in a different direction. Those are things. So if asked as evaluation, which is it, how do we provide evaluation that summarizes how far we've gone? That's real learning. And that's not to say, don't hear me say I give assessments with everybody. Traditional assessments. Information acquisition is important in our courses. I taught language classes. It's a skill. They got bad grades if they couldn't produce certain things. But I also realized at some point that it was a lot less important that they could conjugate verbs correctly. All my past colleagues and professors, pardon, than it was that if they could actually accomplish something with the language. George Rogendorf, a good rest in peace, a friend of mine, was a missionary in Argentina a good friend that I knew, older than me, but he was a missionary. He had been a veterinarian and gone into the mission field. And I met him in Buenos Aires. He was married to an Argentine. He went with a team of 5 families, and they're working in Buenos Aires. Just a salt of the earth guy. But George had trouble learning language. He just wasn't his, and part of it was George wasn't as motivated as him because his wife could do everything for him. So that was part of the issue. George had an amazing vocabulary. George, if you understand anything about Spanish or George only spoke in infinitives. He never conjugated a verb. You never knew a past, present tense, and everything. Amazing vocabulary, never conjugated a verb. He didn't do it, didn't like it, and yet George. I said it on an interview with George and one of the dictators at the time of the country, in a meeting in the presidential palace. I said, and George did just fine. I would, as a language expert, I would not say that George was unsuccessful at language. Very different, and I wouldn't necessarily want everybody to do that. But he internalized, personalized, and he did what he needed to do, and he was very successful at it. But would I give him a D? In life? No, he did very well with it. So and again, now if you were in my class and he didn't do that, he would have probably gotten a bad grade. But what I would have found a way in my class is to design it so that he got credit for the other learning that took place. I want to be able to measure both of those. And I'll find it, depending on the class, hey, if he's studying to be a physician, and we're talking anatomy and physiology, he's getting no slack, right? And we look at that. So what is the impact? And those are all things we also want to do. So, questions about the language. We have 5 things. We have information. We're going to get ready to go here. Right? We have information. We have dialogue, practice, feedback, and evidence. And here's some things that will guide us. I will put this back up in a minute when we start doing it, so you can kind of go back and do it. So now, pitfalls real quickly. Telling is worse than showing. So we want to avoid passive presentation whenever we can. If you know about lossy, like with pictures and stuff here, you have one that's higher resolution, one that starts looking a little jagged. Certain audio formats are more precise than others, and that's because the amount of original information compared to the amount of information that the user actually gets is lossy, it's lower. So if I can give you a totally raw video feed, it is perfect. It's got every pixel, everything that ever happened. By the time I put it in MP4, you lost 40% of what was originally there. But I had to do that because otherwise you wouldn't be able to fit it on your computer. I'd be backing up a truck to your house with big hard drives to get it out there. So, telling and showing. We want to avoid lossiness within. So the thing about teaching and learning is if we build our courses to where it's, and you'll see this, where's the thing? You have a blank thing? Sure. Use it as a whiteboard. So I'll use Peggy. For those of you of a certain age, I could say it now. At the door where Carol Merrill is saying, a few chuckles.
Yeah, thanks for making us all.
Yeah. And for those of you who now feel very old, okay, sorry.
Thank you.
No, your father told you about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
How to alienate people.
Carol Merrill.
So here,
She was the Vanna White of her day.
yeah. I know, we don't need this. So simple, I'll show this up. So this is a typical class. Information, 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 information. Oh, let's have some evidence or practice. Now, here's the problem with this, going up to lossy. A lot of this information came from either me talking to you or you reading. Those are two very, by nature, lossy things in terms of the total possible information that those containers hold to what's actually gotten at the very end. We have such degradation of the information at that point. If that's all there is, that I get about less than 10% on a good day of what I say. So I get sometimes I get almost nothing. And the reason this is important is because somewhere you've probably given me something that says you're responsible for these things are going to be on the test, and so I just go back and pull this out. But there's actually no real learning that happens because it's not possible. It's just too lossy. Now, really bright people, very motivated, come up with their own systems and make it work, but they become active learners. But by nature, this is a very passive, lossy system. So that's what we want to, generally speaking, that's what we want to avoid. And look, I've spent my lifetime, I just spent it doing with you, and I've wasted a lot of our time on lossiness right now, and in their sequencing, so I apologize. So let's get to the work. So, this is an example, lossy versus lock. This is the type of thing I just showed you. I forgot I had a slide on it. But we could put in feedback, we could put in activities, we could do other things that actually create reinforcement, application, personalization. So let's get down to modeling. We're going to talk about world history. All of you, some of you have done this course. Some of you have seen it, or you've all probably had a history course, I'm guessing. And in this course, I'm just giving you an overview, and we'll actually show the real thing here in a minute because you're getting ready to work. So what you're seeing is the session 1 overview. So this is divided into sections, and it's very well done. Let me tell you all the things I really love about this course. It's got great instructional design from an online learning perspective. It's very clear to the students. Notice how nicely we've set out objectives. These are all the things that we really want to do. Fantastic objectives. This is what you should be getting. Notice the nice numbering sequence. I'm following this down. And you'll also note they have this great sequence here. Notice the bolded word. We're going to read, articulate, discuss, experience. We're going to repeat it, and we're going to do it. So students have a sense of familiarity, a common process. They're doing these things. These are all extremely valuable. So I always want to point that out because this is a great online course by our current definition. This is what, if I were, I assure you, having now done reviews for, we'll say all of the major institutions in this state, this gets an A+. In terms of the way the content is put together, it's thoughtful. The students have so much help in here. It's all really great. So be very careful how I say this. When we talk about redesign, we're talking about opportunities trying to do something more. We're not criticizing what's there. What's there is very good by current standards and what we all evaluate. But we want to kind of turn it on its head a little bit and say, well, what else could we do? And I'm going to encourage you, to some extent, to think outside of your normal constraints. Part of the constraint that the team had in doing this is they're working in Moodle. And when you work in Moodle, or any system, I used to work in a classroom that had bolted chairs down. That's a constraint. We couldn't do groups. I've worked in classrooms that didn't have a chalkboard that worked very well. That's a constraint. Now I've got to do something else. Or didn't have an overhead. So it's all constraints. This is one was Moodle. It constrains you the way you organize. They've done a really nice job of that's why they have this overview to make sure that people don't get lost in the side nav, and these other things. So these are all things. But we're going to go in and take a look at it as a group, and now I'm going to have you work in groups. So what I would suggest, some of you have to leave. We're going to take a break here, in fact, in a minute. In fact, we want to do that now. Would that be the easiest thing? So those who have to go on to a class, or who then I've told you you're going to work in groups, just don't want to participate. That's an easy out here. Now, I think Misty and Lauren Dennis probably know whether you really do or not, but that's, but I won't know. But then when you come back, we'll take about 5 minutes or so, grab some dessert, take a quick break, come back, and then organize yourself, and we're going to work in groups. And as groups, we're going to do what we do at NextThought, actually. We do this practice exercise with our Tuesday redesign lunch, where we take courses that we've taken, and the first thing we're going to do is map the course using this language, so that everybody gets to practice using it and say, oh, I see how it works. They did this, 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 and this. And so that's what it looks like. And then we're going to go through redesign. So the first part's easy. It's just taking the cards and saying, okay, we're doing a reading. Okay, I think that's, that's information. We'll do this. We're doing it. And so that'll take us about 10 minutes or so. It won't take anybody very long. You're going to get a piece of poster board and some Sharpies. So some of you who like to be a little artistic get to play. But it's all, that's very low tech. And we'll do it. We'll share them briefly. Then we'll up the ante a little bit. We'll say, okay, well, now how would we do it? So we'll do the design first. So take 5 minutes. Take a break. Those of you have to leave. I apologize, you're not going to get to do the work, the hands-on piece, but I hope this was beneficial in what we've done so far.
We did draw for prizes, and the 2 winners are Sheila Stout and Jeff Cipher. And
Sheila.
You win a tracker and a free coffee downstairs.
That means we're tracking you.
Yeah, it's on your bag to know whether you're.
So actually, it's quieter.
That's exactly what. Yeah, so just, that means not revise it. Saying, there's an activity, because that's what the feedback from the council was. This is a perfect activity, but in a 2 to 3 page paper, how can they do all of these in the Windows level? We're going to say. I mean,
Quick, I'm going to move and sit by a historian.
it should be in
We have 2 here. Is that what you're supposed to do with group projects? Find the in-class expert, get in their group?
I won't be in your group, you're gonna.
We have 2 historians here.
I'll just read it. Yeah, and just send it to me, and then I'll have Sheila. The application goes for the Senate Council. Okay. Yeah, no, that's okay. The 2 bridge courses were Ryan as far as the assignment goes. I didn't do. Yeah, I just pulled it off of the syllabus that Suzanne had. So the next step for you is that if you feel like there are changes that need to be made to either classes, because those are additional courses. So you decide if anything needs to be changed in those courses or textbooks, then just make Suzanne know that. So last time I saw it as the director of bridge. When our advertising. So I would just go and start anything because it's likely to be. So it's been a while. So as far as Jeanette goes, they're fine. They're approved. Now, yes. And some looks like that. Now they don't tell them. Yes. You're welcome. There's just a lot of balls going in that way. coming out Tuesday. And then I just briefly kind of said, hey, so you're supposed to be on. I think once whatever happens, we get education studies, have any communication studies, whatever. And no, I don't know. I don't know if no one pays. One of the students had asked about a portion of enrollment at IGE, and I needed, and it didn't have on his website. I did put it for me to yes, yeah, part of it is the exams, part of it is us meeting. So he hasn't contacted me, but I'm sure we'll see him because
That's a great
I'm sorry. What do I? That would be a very engaging. I told you. I read the IRB. I think that is a struggle. That's
Our last call, everybody, grab your drinks. We were talking and didn't make it for a bio break. We're gonna take it
Delivering the goods, huh?
I would say, probably this side. We'll see if we need to do something here.
Okay. Whatever you sorry.
Pick a Sharpie, take a look at it, and slide it back into the deck.
Yeah, you know how learning.
Now,
Are we all supposed to do that?
and I'll sit back there with Sharpie.
Well, you're doing that one.
Well, I'm happy to give you all the.
Pull that off. So you were
He said he would fix it. Other than that, I'm working on my new. Yeah, we're gonna try some.
Did you say everyone should have a Sharpie?
Yeah, I forgot.
Oh, you stole their markers, did you?
And you probably know.
By the end, I felt like,
Yeah,
I was,
Right?
I was tired of doing this class, so he already climbed up, couldn't quite get it. I was just like.
No, the only thing I'm thinking
Out. Oh, yeah.
It
It wouldn't necessarily affect you.
It's history, it just says blah, blah, blah.
Came out.
It's like Charlie's Brown. Wah, 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 wah. It's on the wall.
That would be the dean.
Okay, I think we've got the final group coming back in, so we can go ahead and get started again. We're going to get into a much more active phase here. What we want to start out doing is, and you don't have to get through the whole thing, you may need to go up to one of these screens and kind of look at it in depth to make sure you can see. We're not going to go into all the, what? Yeah. Yeah, so you, we're not doing
We need to have it.
I was just looking at the keyboard, and I saw the paper.
You
have a paper marker.
It's 1.3. So what we want to do in this is you're going to take your white sheet of paper, poster board, and your little information card, your 5 cards. And we're going to map out what's on this session overview. This is a little inaccurate because we're not in the course, we're not seeing the whole thing, but this is for a quick exercise. This is really designed to give you practice with using the language. So let's do it. We're going to do it from 1.3 through 1.11. And so you're just going to say, okay, I think this is an information, this is a practice, this is a dialogue, etc., and go through, and then try to do it. So again, the purpose is to talk to, make sure you understand kind of what the cards are, how you might use them, and kind of map through. The history people can say, okay, this is what our intent was, and what we're doing. Some of the rest of you don't have the benefit of that knowledge if you've never seen the course before. But again, look it up, see. And so I'm going to give you a couple minutes to do that, about 5 minutes or so. We'll share these on the back, or 10 minutes. We'll see where everybody's going. And you really want to take the cards and you want to stick them on. There we go.
There's another one. Yeah,
Sports group over here got it.
This is like Bernie Sanders.
Hey, got
Their teacher's pet. Just keep going. You want to be with, you're going to get credit to look at this. Yeah, probably, yeah, that's right. That's right. You probably want to go now.
All right, tell me what's everyone on the page. Information.
It says articulate a response.
This is
Explain the response.
well, I don't have my page. Okay, second one is practice.
The next one
Information.
is
Well, no, that's it. Listening, then practice.
Well, that ends up being this, and that because you're dialoguing with them, you respond to the people, you give feedback. That's what dialogue in the speech.
All right.
Okay, but wait a minute, is that not the third? Yeah, so leave this one. The third one's kind of like a combination. Are we allowed to do combinations? We do now. We're thinking outside the box. We're outside the box.
the fourth one.
You say dialogue, but you're not having the third one?
Examine the changing boundaries of
That's just dialogue they're actually having.
Either that or.
at the end of the group.
You know what? In a historian sense, that's practice. What you're doing is you're pulling in a map, or you're pulling in, like in my case, like charts, tables, and you're saying, do you see the patterns?
Right.
And the next one, reading again.
Information.
It depends on that personal material, or whether it's just nothing is concepts,
We're
and you reflect
articulating
as
it in
data.
dialogue.
A response.
I don't have anything set up.
A lot of times when you do that, like you're looking at a map, I thought you were going to test them later.
Yeah, no, really.
And the next you're discussing, you got it.
So I would think the, I'll let you guys say it.
Is that better, worse, or Dr. Sanders?
They're not.
All their. I'm like,
The very last one.
They're not.
Right.
Anyway, like, interacting or applying. Here, I'll just give you that.
Okay.
Where
does,
what?
I was telling you.
Dennis going her lane. I'm not taking ownership.
Yeah, there's one.
And that goes beyond. I'm not taking ownership.
So we're
Oh, you see this getting past. Look at what you're taking.
Actually teaching. We're on numbers. What I actively heard from him is we decided that was
Because the initial part is this, but then you're thinking,
this is too hard.
and that's essentially I see.
I'm trying to get less.
And then examine the reflection.
Whether or not they're.
Or the changing boundaries.
So is that another aspect?
The links, I mean, when I said.
I think that's information.
Well, what we did with the math boundary before was like,
once you respond to.
My thing is whenever you show somebody a visual representation of data, in our fields, I can see that as the equivalent of like a math problem set for math guys.
So like a practice.
Like I see it as a practice.
And then the last one is the question. And that would be evidence, right?
Or is it self-feedback? I don't know. If you're just talking about reflection during a part of presentation, we're looking at ourselves. He said here that self-reflection could be in it.
Which kind of trigger.
I mean, that's okay.
Look at you, Dean, I'll take a thinking.
When the friends are like,
Is that gonna reach?
You guys.
Yeah, you yank really hard and make like make sure.
You do?
I think she's got it.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I love it.
I was making sure I knew what the next slide was. All right, where are we going now? What? I'm not contextualized. Okay, go ahead, wrap this up. I see you've all been tremendously successful at playing our little card game. So, here, this is interesting. If you don't mind, just holding up, you don't have to finish, holding up what you have so far. All right, John, why don't you guys, we'll start back over here, we'll just kind of go in some kind of, John, all right.
We were discussing on which one we think a couple could be. So you take a couple different directions with it.
And I think everybody, I heard that across, we weren't, it's like, was this evidence, was it practice, was dialogue here? And the group that actually had some knowledge about it, you'll see this, if you'll hold that one up, because it's a really great example, you can see they had actually built in that they were both, and they were doing it. And that's fine. And that's great. And there's so there would be discrepancy. So this group show behind you too, so they can see that. So there's a similar. We're calling some things dialogue here, etc., instead of reflection, but that's the same thing. I mean, and feedback, so we can kind of see that. But okay, great. That's really similar.
We had some that we thought were two things mixed together as well.
Excellent.
But we copied off the historians, so.
Yeah. No, that's great. The good news is I just look at those. John, this is just as an example. Drop it here. The good news is that there's a lot of similarities. Obviously, there should be, right? I mean, and you can see why we like to use this. It's pretty simple, isn't it? You get in and go, okay, information. The only question here is because you were doing somebody else's. If you were doing one from scratch, okay, I kind of know what I'm doing. One of the things that I like to do with people, and we wouldn't do it, but when we have multiple classes, if we were doing a program design, when we went out, we would always start with mapping existing things. I would put them on a wall and put like all 10 courses on a wall and make people stand way back where you couldn't see what anything was, and just look at the colors and see if there was anything out of balance there. Do you have a sea of blue? Maybe that's a problem. And so that's a way, so again, as a visual design language, it lends itself to doing multiple things. Just at a visual glance, you go, hey, maybe I have too many of those in a row. Because dialogue's a great thing, but dialogue can be lossy as well, right? If you have too much of it going on and you're not guiding that, you lose some things. So there's a balance there. And to the outline on the board, which is so great, I love that. Did we lose location and structure anywhere because we had things? And so that's and one of the advantages of an online course, by the way, this is one of the great things about online, is because if you do it well, you're always sticking that outline in front of them. And if you do it well, and so that's something that students really, they do well. They like a map, can do it. So we didn't want to make you feel like we're having you do all the work. So Miss Sabatini here did her own little map this morning, or yesterday, last night, I guess she said that to me. And again, she started in a little bit different place, but something like this. This is that we actually use, we have all this in a design in Lucidchart. It's also available from the website. You can get it in OmniGraph or Google Draw, etc. So you can do these digitally. When we're doing things like this, we do it hands-on, we do it digitally, and you can see kind of, she's done it and filled out, here's what I think they were doing, just our staff. And we had some of the same questions. Should we call this evidence or practice? That was a big thing. The difference, right, is evidence really means that this is an evaluation point. Practice means, so think of it in terms of both risk and meaning. So practice is really individual, personal, I'm doing it, I may be giving you a grade on it, but even in the traditional sense, you get to take a quiz every Wednesday. Okay, and that may be, it's really, I would argue if you do order pop quiz, it's not even an evaluation since they're really just checkpoints, or maybe even practice. Evaluation is, this is high risk. This means I am evaluating if you're making progress or not if you're paying attention, if you're doing stuff. Are you really, is something happening here? And so we tended to look at the first session as we were going through, that it was, we could have said the very end was evidence, but more than anything, we saw practice happening and going along and getting this and getting into it. History is a great course to practice this with, because traditionally, and they've done a great job with this course again, traditionally history is only information. You go to a traditional history class, think of, if you're like me, I go back to this horrible, had nothing good to say about it. Horrible Western civilization course I took as a senior in college, where it was the typical paradigm where the professor stood up and told stories every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 50 minutes. And sometimes it was history, assigned readings in the book, and then gave true-false exams with true-false exams with very carefully worded from an earlier edition of the book. Because he had never been current enough. We kept buying new editions. I don't know if he really knew there was a new edition, so the wording was different, and he would try to trick you, that kind of thing. That was a really powerful learning. That was one of my most memorable things. Never do this to anybody. But that was just information. So but history often gets taught that way. We're going to do this kind of, we're going to contextualize information. This course does a great job of trying to give examples and go through. Well, now we want to take it though. I want to go back for just a second. I don't know if I listed them. I didn't. I meant to relist them. So let me go back here to here. And we're going to think again. So now, again, so let's take a fresh look, or put things back up there, and you get a little latitude here. You're going to redesign, but just think for a minute. I want to start with contextualization. How would you do this if you were trying to not only contextualize them in terms of the information, which they do very well, but with relationship to their location personally, where there's a connection from the beginning, before they even start presenting information? How might we do that? Where's agency beyond discussion? How do we give them something they can really own, or how can they produce history and become historians as well as just people taking information? How does it become personal? Those types of things. In the exercise, because eventually in this round, you're still going to have to put it back in Moodle. In this exercise, don't think of technology, think of activities or ways to repackage information. That's all you should think about, because things that you could do fairly low tech that would be good. I'm not going to give you any hints beyond that. We're going to share some things after this round with you, things that just occurred to us. But so I would encourage you. We'll go back to the model again, and you can look at what you currently got and say, okay. And you don't have to do the whole thing. If you just want to go through because they've done this great job of read, articulate, discuss, examine, read, articulate, discuss, examine, reflect. If you just want to go through the first part of that, read, articulate, discuss, examine, one section, which is, and again, kudos to the team for doing that, because I wish everyone would do that. There's a real method there. Go through and say, if we were going to redesign this experience, all you got is 5 cards, or redesign the experience and do something that presents the same content, but we're going to try some other things. And this is really experimental. You can break it, it's okay. You can't break a poster board and thing. So, and then I'm going to have you talk about what you thought would be cool to do. And I'm not going to give you too long, because we're going to get to the hard one as the next round. where it's all gonna count, all right? This is still low stakes, doesn't matter. The next one, we give out, the free car and everything else. So go out, so get back into it, pick up where you were, say, okay, now, we're gonna try to go through these again, and we're gonna see what else might we do. What are some other things? What are things that you've done in your classes, face-to-face on, that were really successful in getting people to personalize, to create, to do, and try to apply them?
Just go get them face-to-face and
Well, I think one of, like, the thought that was coming to mind for me, what did I say that
The Vietnam War and history.
One of the things before I could do to give your agency, so that go out as a group, collectively,
Maybe a discussion.
In the time with that, I don't know if that would give them a sense of.
Hey, I'm sorry. What are we? We can't.
Concept.
It's an activity.
So what you did before, right?
Researching
So now.
music videos, 3 eras of music videos. And now what we're doing is then we're going to compare
Okay.
the
And we're gonna
changes.
try to do those things.
in
Try to,
music
I gotta do the same stuff across.
Right.
What order would I do it in? How would I do it?
Right.
What kind of new activities might I create?
Catalyst caused these changes.
And that's why the cards are useful, because they start, I
Or
kind of
after
start
the
out,
test.
say, well, I don't know, one of these.
And so,
They
but
try to
they
design it
choose
first.
the videos they want
So
to.
we have a plan.
Apply activities to it. You want to start with collection?
So here's what
Practice,
we're-
put that down.
Yeah,
Okay, this is what I said.
Take it,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know. I'm just-
It's a very.
I find, I'll just interrupt real quickly, I find one thing that's helpful when I'm doing an experience like this is to think about the kind of experiences I want them to have instead of jumping specifically into, here's exactly how I would do it. So like I might say, hey, I think I want to start with a practice. So it's been a practice, I want to do a reflection. So I just put some cards down and then I try, so I kind of do a general just outline, and then I can start saying, well, this is what I would think would be the most effective way to do that. It kind of builds a little, it lets me play with the things, the experience I want to create, and then how I can create it.
Yes,
right. Right. And the purpose of that is implemented by the class. Now,
Can we not use that at all?
So we're still doing that. And they should start
Well,
saying, well, I thought
One
this.
way that we get the information, that's the highest way to leave information. So if we want to go back and look at the priorities and say, if we want to personalize engagement at an agency, that's the first thing we want to do, is that we want to give them ownership. And reading the book's not going to give them a sense of ownership or investment.
Okay.
I don't think it's really big, because I feel like
Right, so then
you present the concepts and the theories or whatever
So the
of
question
discipline,
basically says,
but if that's all you do is then say
is
give a test on it, and you're right, they don't.
the
What I'm gonna do is have the information from the people who are experts in the field, and now you go to what you're doing, you apply these concepts and what it means.
Or is he a dictator?
Does that make
So
sense?
then
I
it's
don't know if
a-
you get a preparatory course.
But that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so then the
They've
students
got
are
to be launch.
their point of view, and then they have to
What's even
respond.
gonna look for?
Well, not necessarily, but just, see, all the content experts are saying, like, they're, I don't think they have to articulate their, right, which point of view they are, but, you share your opinion, so after that,
Not just words on a page, but like, oh, that's.
did they purpose?
And
And then
no,
they
you
comment
have
on
to
two
do
others,
it.
actually, they're, can't see anything else.
But I do think that you could get them to engage with that learning process if you.
To me, that's the same, that takes the place of.
So you have to watch.
Discussion.
Everyone.
I guess it's like some disciplines it's so hard, you used to do that in others. Like in intro to search, I could totally do it because I'm dealing with right now, breaking down the band leaders and jobs, whatever the issue might be.
And a lot of business courses are trying to do that too.
Right, management classes, like, well, tell me about a bad job you had.
Yeah.
So you can start with the experience. I don't know if you do it with history. That's where I was struggling.
They would see this is completely changed their whole dynamics.
So is it, do we need to build, as he was talking about, we tend to lose information. And so, I don't know.
I know that's what.
Yeah, right. And when it gets very intentionally, do we need to find links to these other types of?
You gotta get the plan.
Right. Well, it's almost like we need to provide
Like, when you guys know what impression you have of like this. Like, I would think constantly modern world. So I think, if I remember, I guess, started like this is like.
First
I think kind of like, what would be what would have been like if we lived there?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
All right, time checkpoint, you should be getting most of the way through your little exercise. Well, hold up your evidence here.
I'm watching organizers. So they can find information that's a Google search or going to the textbook or
Economic concept they talk about it. So.
Yeah, or just interrupt people with a different approach.
They're still using evidence from.
You could start like making it more personal. You can start with, you know, where were your ancestors at this point of time? So, like,
The problem is
ancestors
finding
from
out,
Africa, were
finding
they
out in English.
you know, were they Eastern Europeans?
And that gets more difficult with other chapters because you pass these first two, you really don't dwell on the pretty.
But that's kind of why I would give up them saying that it's information.
Finding things that have always.
That's why the first year they should read about 100 books.
It's really good if you're.
Preach it, brother.
Yeah.
I mean, I see some philosophical I get all of this in terms of today's attention. It's true, sometimes people don't something. And
What it is,
Yes, it's all.
you can get in. You get
They're given all this information, and they have to give it back. They have to want it. But I think what we're getting caught up on is this question of like which comes first, the egg kind of thing. Whereas what the real issue is, of these 5 cards, there's a tendency, especially history classes, to only add one. Especially with the more personalization, application, contextualization that's being used. This is why I want to have this. So we're thinking like, what could we do to make these kids see why they should get read about what happened in Cengage
is motivating people to want to learn something.
You're invoking the police? Come on.
Now we're doing a comparison, right?
Many of us who discovered the joy of learning. Half or more of our time in trying to convince people that this might be a good idea to learn. They just don't know how to do it. What do you want? What do you expect?
And given this class will log out.
You're all doing work over here. You could just steal from their work. I was gonna say.
Always a negative to start with.
No, or I think there are many ways to do that. That's just, it's just, you want to be aware of why. It's always negative to start with anything and not know why we're doing it. But if we have a good, there's lots of good reasons to start with information. Depending on what I'm teaching, why I'm teaching, et cetera. If you're watching something that's really, that's basic, it could be that people already have a pretty basic idea of things, and I don't need to contextualize it, they're already there, they're doing it. I'm trying to deepen their knowledge. For example, I'm teaching an upper division, I'm teaching an upper division Bible class. And these kids have already been through multiple levels. Now I'm teaching something in the New Testament, Pauline epistles, something like that. They should already know these basics. I'm not going to, I don't, and I've already had them in the same class for, the same kids. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I'm going to let the content do that for me. I'm going to do contextualization through the information as opposed to have to do it before. Because first semester Gen Ed, the freshman, I'm probably going to spend more time. I'd be more concerned in the first semester Gen Ed class starting with information. By the time I'm a sophomore, I wouldn't be concerned about that. Well, and again, it depends on the group. It's always different. As long as we do it knowingly and with a purpose, that's fine.
Where they have
This in mind, it's a freshman level course.
I would strongly encourage some type of, and I'll give you some examples in a minute, some type of contextualization. And it could be a simple, hey, we're of the age of it. What do you remember about the Vietnam War? Or show pictures of 5 famous art pieces from 5 different wars. Which one of these do you reckon? But again, it's nothing that whole writing down exercise. It's not even to try to teach them anything. It's just to make sure that you get check where you really know, just to get you thinking before I lay this on. So that's
the first teacher.
I could just be doing a survey. I would do a simple poll even. And say, what do you know? Check yes or no. I mean, it can be something really simple. I've had them gone out and I'll curate videos. To go out and find 3 videos as a person is a way to do it. So it could be all kinds of things. Just to make them start, instead of we're all kind of starting normalizing, and then I'm gonna lay the information. But once if they're at more advanced level, then I would rather do that for the information. I present the information and building in my information presentation, get them to do more personal contextualization, which is I'm sure all of us do anyway. It's just a little harder in that first step before they're all.
Okay,
let's we have some groups having way too much fun.
We're really sorry. We don't let her get out of her office much.
So now we've been going through the second round, and y'all do different ways. And again, there's no right answers. We had a great conversation over here. I'm going to share it because it was a great question. Because the question was, is it always wrong to start with information? The answer is no, of course not. The question is, the idea is we want to have contextualization of both information and the learner. You can do that through the content. You can do other ways, and we'll give you a couple of examples of different ways to do it. It varies on whether you're teaching a first semester freshman course, and this is their beginning learning experience, as opposed, we're talking about Don teaching an advanced Bible class, and he's had these people in other courses, and now they're doing something, they're already contextualized with themselves, with him, hopefully, they've known it, this isn't the first rodeo, right? We've been through this. So you can do a lot, and that's why we love teaching upper division and graduate classes. We can also get deeply into things really quickly, but let the information do that. So different context. So no, there's no necessarily right sequence. What we want to be is guided by just our ideals, our kind of, we like our peace model, and as we're doing that, just keep playing with the design. So what we do is, what I encourage this group to do, what we want to do is design an experience, and then we come back and figure out the specifics. So Peggy's watching me do this. I will stand at a whiteboard, and I'm not even thinking at first about, well, it needs to be this kind of a reading. I'm just thinking, this is the experience. So I design, it's like designing, it really is like architecture. I design the type of structure that I want to build, and then I start honing in and say, okay, what's the best way within that structure to do that type of feedback or to do that? So I don't try to start specific, I go general down. But, so back to you. So we'll start with this group. They have the people who aren't historians and don't do the history course have no pressure at all. Can do whatever they want, right? And evidently they did. No, they were.
Evidence is in a row.
All right, so go ahead. You guys tell us just a little bit about what you did.
What do we do, guys?
So we started out with reading the chapter, roughly reading the chapter, but engaging with the chapter by making an outline and asking questions as they read through so that they're engaging with the material.
Okay.
And
Good
then
idea.
our second thing was about the women and men right things, that we would have each student, depending on their own gender, write a letter to themselves about the concepts that they're reading about. And then, the Napoleon thing. We would have them come out.
By the way, Dennis kept invoking Napoleon. Their conversation. I don't want to know what it was about, but it seems like it's not a surprise. It's not. I'm sorry, go ahead.
We thought about having the students come up with an adjective or a phrase, each one of them that describes the French Revolution, and then to bring that and say this is how Napoleon embodies that particular adjective or phrase, and then have the students respond to each other at how well they thought that adjective or phrase did describe Napoleon.
It's fun. I like that.
And then for our final, our evaluative, that we would have group presentations, and this is where we don't know anything about history, because we thought maybe we could do French and Indian War, the Napoleon era, and then whatever, the Vienna Congress, whatever. Give them each one of those, and that they would present that to the class, and then they would reflect, each student would reflect on what they learned from the other presentations, so that then we would be able to, as a professor, be able to evaluate whether they actually learned what we wanted them to learn about each of those areas. So that's what we.
Great. Nice. Fantastic. Great ideas. And I hope, and one of the reasons we want to do this, it's great to have faculty from different places come and do it. It gives perspective, right? We all look at it, and hopefully if nothing else comes out of this, a couple of ideas, so as the team, they keep looking at the curriculum, they go, oh, that was a good idea, we're going to try that out. And so that's always fun. So back over to this side, what did you guys do?
I stepped out.
No ownership at all. No ownership. Agency out the window.
We're going to do an activity. We can practice marching into Russia. And what do they do? It's like a fitness element. So we're going to look at that. No, I was not a part of it. I'm sorry. That was all I had.
I don't even know where to begin.
Start at the very beginning.
I'd like to come back to us. I'll knock one out right now.
Well, we actually talked about looking at the information and then getting immediately into some discussion.
Okay.
That's great. A lot of discussion about relevance, and so how did this relate or apply, and then producing some kind of historical perspective, from a how did that connect with your family or your, is there history or some kind of connection?
Some genealogy,
some kind of
fun.
Yeah, to maybe see, and then end more with a story. This is maybe how these two stories, or however many students you have, how it kind of connects with where we are presently. Trying to make relevance was kind of the underlying idea.
It's great.
I don't think they needed you, John.
Oh, no, I would only drag them down. Which is way better.
That's no surprise to us. Yeah. Let's go back to this table. We'll let the historians go last here.
Go ahead, Ellen.
We got nothing. No, we got
All we did was talk about which came first, the chicken or the egg.
No, we got off on a whole chicken the egg thing, but I mean, some of the ideas we had were what could you do to try and build more ownership and relevance? We were kicking around some things like, would there have been movies or classic literature that was set in that time period that they were familiar with? Talking about families, like asking students, okay, at this point in history, we're on a global map where your ancestors located. How would these events have affected your ancestors?
That's fun. I like that. Yeah, I love that. Relevance is always a fun one, and there's so many creative ways. That's a great idea. We keep those connections, and it's always different, right? With every generation of students, it's like they look a little bit different in what they find relevant. So I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I really like that. That's good. All right, what did you guys come up with?
kind of went down the Napoleonic rabbit trail and started talking about a better time. And then started comparing it to Donald Trump.
I knew we should have divided, we should have split them up.
It went so fast. So instead of starting with information, instead of starting with reading, we started with the possibility of a discussion about what do they already know about this time period, or what do they think they know about this time period, given that many of them, since this is a freshman level class, may have had world history in the last 2 years of high school, may have a vague remembrance of some of this, certainly will try to apply their U.S. history knowledge to the second chapter of the week. But just to give us an idea, as you were talking about earlier, of where they're starting, since the reflection paper is the last component of the week. Then going on to the reading, and then after that, the primary source as a practice, since it requires them to read the primary documents, to construct an interpretation, and that assignment is not clarified there, but does ask them to apply it to the future and the significance of these documents moving forward, not only for that time and place, but for others as well. And then the last thing that we were able to do before we completely derailed was the discussion forum component about, and changing the wording up, instead of asking them, was Napoleon a revolutionary or a reactionary, ask them to pick one of the European countries, or maybe even a Latin American country, since that's the second chapter. So basically say, you are from such and such place. As a person from that place, give me evidence that you have from the book, and we've talked about possibly finding some other evidence as well. Would you see Napoleon as a revolutionary or a reactionary based on the evidence you found for that? Because it is very different depending on where you're from. And possibly adding to that, though we're also playing with the possibility of adding it somewhere later in the week, the last half of the 6 weeks course is asking them to begin developing a current event project, where they're taking a current event, a current problem in the world, and tracing its historical origins, and also talking about what's going on today. So maybe finding a way of starting them to think about that practice by finding ways of connecting current issues to these historic events.
That's awesome. Yeah. Good. And I think you see we're kind of what we're getting at. And again, before we get into the last phase, the idea that the sticky notes are kind of kinesthetic in their whole thing. It's easy just to sit at your desk, put something up, put it on the whiteboard. We'll leave a couple sets of these if you want to play with them. They're easy to do, but it really is helpful when you're thinking about a course, et cetera. What experience do you want people to have? There's always a right way to give them that experience. There really is. But what is it? Architect the experience and then move forward. So we'll go on now and share a few ideas, and I hope this works. Should have loaded those.
Guess we'll find out when I'm here.
Richard, from you probably.
Sure, go ahead.
Nothing to see here, talking
Yeah.
about.
It's all right. I can go back. I should have done this next time. It's fun. So I can give you some of the ideas that we came up with. Personal contextualization activities. We thought of a lot of things as we just kind of brainstormed about this, and you've come up with some of them. Well, how do you create relevance? How do you make the fact that now we're talking about this particular period of world history relevant? What do these people have in common? Things that jump to mind are the family is a good one. So my family goes back to Scotland. Some kids know, some don't. What is your, do you have an ethnic route that you're trying to follow back, and a branch that you're really going with? Do you, I think another thing in this particular case, what intersection does this possibly have with your personal viewpoints, your faith, for example? The tradition you belong to or not, or thinking that you've had in those regards. There are lots of different ways. We looked at in terms of trying to create those types of, we did a lot of with like creating things. So, but one of the things we thought, and I share with this group, is that we like to do evidence first. I mean, feedback or reflection first, but it can be very simple. It can be a poll. A simple poll that says, for example, which one of these paintings do you recognize? But they're all have to be associated with major movements or wars. But they're famous paintings, and they may not. This movie goes best with which of these things? Again, we're not trying to teach them anything in that reflection period. We're just trying to get them to start reflecting and to start locating themselves. So there'll be a lot of things. We like exercises that, again, we're trying to contextualizing things with things that they would be related to, images, etc. We like curation exercises a lot. So, you give me access? Sure? Not lying?
Not trying to lie.
So, we'll do so starting assumptions survey, right? Which is one that we'll have. So, for example, which one of these do you recognize? We'll show pictures or photos, images. Why do you think it was important? Do a survey. It could be a simple poll, multiple. We like journals. I would, especially for a course like this, and one of the things that came to me was this would be a great course for a storybook project. Either as groups, through a blog, either as groups or as individuals. But again, ownership of that, you have to become a historian throughout there, but you can do it from a perspective. You're writing on behalf of a family, you're writing on behalf of some person, you create your own personal narrative about this as if you were there and do it. And that's your real evidence, because you can't do that if you don't get it. This isn't about do I know that, it's about do I understand what this is. I'm a big fan of those types of things. They're easy to grade because it's really do it or don't do it, show evidence or not. You're not spending a lot of time trying to get them specific feedback on, man, you've really got some information organization issues here. That's not feedback. It's like, are you getting, it's really easy, I can tell you, in 5 minutes you can go through a student's journal on something like this and understand, are they going somewhere or not, are they making an effort? It's actually less time than a lot of other stuff that you do. It can be more meaningful if they do it. And it's also easy to set up. I'll point you, I don't have it here, but I'll point you to Laura Gibbs' online course where she does storybooks out of the University of Oklahoma for her myth folklore class, or Indian epics class, where all her students have to retell the myths in different languages, different ideas and kind of context. That's her big piece of evidence they all have to do. And it's really successful, it's incredibly popular, and all of her students would argue they got more out of that than any other courses, all the other upper division genetic courses they put together, because they internalized it and did it. And it was the myth means something to them personally. They understand what these Aesop's fables or whatever they're doing are about now. They can tell you about different things. So a journal entry is that. So if you were going to do something like a journal or a storytelling thing, it's a really good beginning exercise. Right? What's your experience? Again, we're using war here. World history happens to have a lot of them. But what's your family history with war? It's a good from an English composition perspective too. That's deep contextualization right off. What do you know? Again, we're not expecting to know why that war was important. If they know the name of it, great. I knew there was something in Europe. I knew there was, my brother fought in Iraqi freedom, or my sister was. It doesn't matter. That's not the context where we're going. That okay, now you got it. You kind of see where you're at. Now let's talk about how these things. We know that you have a place to put all this in. Video curating is fun and it's easy. We do like to have students go out and curate. Find 3 YouTube videos that do this. Find 3 things that are images that represent for you what this is. And it's as simple as putting a link down somewhere. But again, that can be done in a discussion board, on an online course. It can be shared. Again, if you have a storybook, if you're doing blogs, they can put it there. They can send them an email, put it in a document. It doesn't really matter. Again, you don't have to go look at all these. But what you will find, they're going to give you 3. They probably looked at 50. Right. You're talking about an exercise that keeps on giving. They went down rabbit holes like we all do, and they learned stuff that they never would have learned otherwise. Oh, is this a good one or is that? Because remember, if it's the beginning of a course and they don't know what all's expected yet, they'll just start looking. I'm not sure if this is the right one. If it's the best one, that's a really good one. And they will check so many more than 3, the average student will, and they'll actually watch them. And you didn't even assign any of that. You just said, go find 3 videos. And so that's a really powerful, and that can work in any course. We were just talking earlier today with OU, because their SVP was over in our office, and talking about they have several courses, these MOOCs that they have, and one of them is a human anatomy and physiology course, which has now received over 1.5 million YouTube hits. In addition to whatever it's had in the course, people have taken this online MOOC, but we just put the videos on YouTube, and it's up there. And in many cases, it has the top hits on some of these things. Right now, you can imagine immune systems are big. Zerk virus and everything, 500,000 hits in the last couple of months on this, because they're well done, etc. But you realize people all over the world are looking, and they're just finding and doing. It's amazing what's out there, what people will find, and what they can learn, and how much of that is already going on. And so video curating is fun. It's easy. And this is one of the reasons, YouTube is, I know we all think sometimes the internet's crazy, and it is, absolutely, but this harnesses something they're already doing anyway.
It also makes them evaluate, because what I've noticed is that they'll say, well, this video contradicted this video, and it makes them think much more deeply about it.
They'll get right into it without any help, right? They go, yeah, but I'm not sure. And they'll even send questions to go with it, right? I got these 3, but these 2 don't seem to, does that matter? And you go, okay, you're learning. That's good. I like that. Okay, digital literacy is alive and well. I'm good. I feel better.
Doesn't matter. Answer, great.
Right.
and also, huge fan of low stakes. Low stakes, but well-crafted activity means very high engagement. The higher the stakes, the more the risk. We're all in here, I ask you, share an experience, we don't know each other yet, we haven't been having a good time, it's like, it's a little higher stakes. I want to look at. Now that we all know each other, okay, I don't have to take him seriously, I'll say whatever I want to. You can say, but that's the way it goes. Art recognition, this is always a good one, it can be video recognition. I'm a huge fan of video clips. Like, just show something simple, what is this, how do you compare this to? You can use it in any kind of way. Which one of these things do you think, which one of these clips, this is a good one, represents what you think how Napoleon communicated blank? And you show something from from a Clint Eastwood Western. You show all these cool clips that nobody would recognize. Thank you, John. You're big. But you do those kind of things, and again, it's relevant, it's engaging, but it makes them think. We want to think laterally and kind of out there, and it gives them that context. So, big fan again. And again, these are easy things to do. Those are the types of things that we would look at. And again, those things work really, really well in a face-to-face class.
Could you go back up to the top? I missed the very first one.
Yes, now. So our first one was starting assumptions. Surveys, polls. Big thing. Face-to-face, it's easy. You can so many different ways to do this. Online, it's easy too. You can even, in a poll, depending on what type of if it's a link to a poll, sometimes it can be fun to put this inside of your reading. If your reading is a PDF or something, just put a link to it inside of there. They link out and take the poll in the middle, so all of a sudden your reading became more than information. You can merge information, context, of all these kinds of things and interactivity right in the same content. So one of the things that I'm going to, as we're going to do to the very last, I'm going to have you all come up with one concept of designing a content activity. So we're not redesigning the course again, but if you could design one cool content activity, maybe a couple minutes to do it, that combines as much of this as possible, kind of seeing this, that you think would make, history would come alive. I own history, I own this. What kind of thing, some of you've already done it, you start making things more complex. What kind of construct? If you had to, you don't try to put all 5 cards together, but about 3 is about enough. But what could you do with something scenario-based? What could you do, again, technology will find a way. Just think about that real quickly. I'll give you about 2 minutes. Kind of come up writing around one really cool concept for sharing any of these lessons.
I was asking
Christmas.
Yeah. Now you're gonna have to go.
It's easy to do. It's not certain.
For those questions. And then
Rest of the classes and juries.
You can also have some fun stuff with like what if scenarios. The one that comes up sometimes is, so the classic argument is like one of the reasons why the less modernized first is because they had a team state where if you then put stuff that doesn't take it over. So you put that stuff where it's just in China, so you get every style industrial revolution. Well, before England, they killed it because they had to change stuff over. So then you just wonder what if, why did China have a team state and they hit the industrial revolution first? How those
this seems stolen.
Yeah. There's a current. TV series.
I saw advertising somewhere. Suppose Germany wants for different
One video. That's a reading.
What if?
Don't
How would it look? How would it change the course of history?
Okay, we have a blank piece of paper. We go with what if?
Well, doesn't, did I understand the question right? Isn't it that kind of thing? It's what he's, like a creative exercise?
Yeah, creative.
Okay, you got 1 minute to come up with your full concept.
So we're gonna do that would be, as far as the sticky notes, would be practice on probably like.
Well, because the practice part of it would be sort of, you understand the dynamics of history, blah, 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 understand if we change one thing, can you then follow that down the trail line? It's kind of an application. Well, actually, but most recent science fiction is essentially, you take one element of history, the source of
Yeah, right, that's what I would think.
There's a video I remember watching with my dad.
Right.
Oh, yeah, it's like, you know, just like a time warp thing, it's like a modern.
Yeah.
Or a battleship or something that shows up in 400. Yeah, it's a little different.
If you didn't come up with something, you can designate a person right now while I'm talking to come up with something on the spur of the moment in the group. So that's fine.
How dare you? Okay. There's gonna be throwing these actually. Whatever that X-Men guy was that throws the cards. That's what.
All right, let's start with this group again. So what do you guys think?
You got me again? Okay, so we picked our most boring activity because we thought that should be the one that we should, try and liven up a little bit. So we went back to our reading and questioning, outlining activity, and decided to, as the students are coming up with a main theme or whatever as they're outlining, that we would require them to go out and find 3 anythings. It could be an article, it could be a video, it could be a picture, it could be anything that related back to from today, that related back to these major themes or the major questions that are coming up. And we were thinking, especially in a political year, if you're talking about leadership, there would be so much stuff out there that they could bring that would relate where they live now with what they're reading in the text.
No, that's great. That would be good. Just have one of the debates and the pictures of the people.
Right. Yeah.
The different historical figures.
Right.
And why.
Right.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
Well, they have this great idea about political commercials.
Oh, that's
We would
great.
Like, have them build a political commercial, and then we grew that into, if you had a face-to-face class, you would assign 5 or 6 students to be a particular person, let them know who else was going to be on the debate, and you would stand them up in front of the classroom and let them do one of these, very postmodern debates where they're trashing each other right and left, and, presenting their, so.
Like what?
I thought of a variation of that, of something that I used to do in one of my courses, where it's an improv activity where you gave people cards about who they were, and they couldn't tell anybody, but you had to guess from the way they interacted. They couldn't use an acronym, archaic language. They had to just throw up to the views they expressed, etc. You had to guess who they were. And so yeah, those are great. I love the commercial idea. That's fun. And again, you're actually creating history, right? And you realize, and you're aware that you're doing it. You're not doing it unawares.
We were talking about kind of what if exercises, like for like modern world. I remember seeing once the fact that China had the start of an industrial revolution well before it happened in England and in Germany, but they just kind of killed it off because the emperor couldn't keep his hands off of it. So you can do a what if of, well, how would world history have evolved differently if they would have had the industrial revolution first? And so just kind of play down that, and then
that's great.
It teaches them to see connections.
I love that. John, yes.
Okay. We talked about, we all came up with one separate, but we said taking some current events. So you guys mentioned reaction and revolutionary. So in what ways is the Islamic State reactionary and revolutionary? So what ways could you build a case for both? Then how could you compare that to Napoleon? So in what ways was Napoleon? Well, what are some of those similarities that we see? And we were saying, we opened the class with actually an activity where you talked about a personal event of how you reacted to something, and you kind of bring these three things together so they find themselves in it. They're able to see the historical understanding, but they get a better grasp of Napoleon.
That's great. I remember one of the most challenging things that I ever heard. I was listening to a lecture by Martin Marty, and he was talking about fundamentalism. It was a big lecture on fundamentalism, and he was talking about fundamentalists are essentially people of the book. That's what defines it. That was his definition. People of the book. Well, of course, I was trying to duck. And I come from a very, strong people of the book tradition. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course, you kind of know you're a fundamentalist, but not in the way that those other people are fundamentalists, right? That's okay. I'm not that kind of a fundamentalist. And all of a sudden, I'm like square in the depth. But it was very challenging. But those kind of definitions and how you wear them and what they mean. And all of a sudden, he's talking about other people, not just in the United States, but abroad that are fundamentalists. And I'm going, but I'm not like them, am I? And it was a very challenging thing. It was a great moment. And so I like that exercise. The goal is, again, redesign is something. Course design never stops. It's an open-ended thing. And I have a couple of quick notes to end. This is the type of process I always encourage people to do. Good course design happens as they're about an iteration of about 10 times each class. And then you finally have one. I encourage people, if possible, to design the experience they want to have. Don't design the content. The content's the easy part. Design the learning experience and what it is. And ask yourself fundamental questions. How are you really going to measure learning? Not information acquisition. That's easy to measure. How are you going to measure learning? Not today, but as they come back for some alumni gathering, how are you going to measure that? And are you measuring? Or you care about measuring? I think you do. And how do you build experiences to determine that and make it work? And then, follow those guidelines. And we never get it right the first time. We get it right the fifth time. We keep all these things evolve. The ideas that we've shared in here, well, that would be a cool exercise, or variations of things we've all done in different places over the years. And the final thing is, good course design is absolutely a collaborative and community-based experience, just like learning is. It is learning. And where possible, this is you have so many advantages being at Southern Nazarene. I can't even begin to list as a faculty, as a people, as an institution. I know every group has its own issues, but you have so many advantages over other places. So many. The fact that Peggy and I were commenting on this. Peggy's a project manager also at NextThought and works at other institutions with faculty on projects. And the fact she was almost it was kind of like watching a strange new type of entity that people could come in and be friendly and talk to each other and have this thing. I mean, not for nothing. It's not common in a lot of universities. So because you can share, I would, cross-disciplinary teams. I think a great exercise is to have people from different departments plan courses together. Not necessarily teach them. We always talk about that, but plan them. I'm fascinated about this whole thing. One thing I kept doing is how are we making connections to every other thing that's going on in the kids' lives? Because history is one of those places where it really happens. And how am I getting that back into communication, to sociology, to the Bible, to everything else? There's something here for everybody, and it is a true cross-disciplinary thing. And so, how are we doing that? But not just do it from a historian's perspective, but do it from the business perspective, from the sports perspective, from every perspective in doing that. And so, I think there's a real value in that. I hope you found the language piece a little useful. I think thinking at a high level, sometimes we bog down in the weeds when we're doing things. And I encourage you to try that. If it doesn't work, fine. It's the whole thing. It's only good if they're valuable to you and make you actually use them. But I find it really helpful to make pictures of what we're going to do and then start trying to come up with things. There's no end of cool ideas of things that we can do online, in class, etc. If any of this is interesting and you want to follow up, you have questions, or you're thinking about something, feel free to reach out. And we spell Peggy names properly here. It's actually P-I-G-G-Y. So we'll change that for her. At NextThought, you can always say Rob Reynolds at NextThought. And if you want to check out some of the learning design things that we do, on Fridays I write a piece in our blog on learning designs about solving very specific problems like this. So today's was actually on the top, one of the things we talked about today, about how to go from that to that, and how to start out with reflection, and what are ideas, and why does it matter, and how do you measure. And so I'm using those same cards, and I do that every Friday, and write about that. Some things may interest you. I talk about how to create collaboration with video. One of the most challenging things we have in online courses, we like to use videos. They can be good, but generally they're very bad the way we do them, because they become static information sources. We know that the attention span, the drop-off is so high that after a minute, that all of a sudden you've got a 5-minute video, nobody watched it anyway. And so how do you keep that from happening, and how do you build collaboration so it's not just a static one thing? So these are the types of things we do. Always happy. Dennis knows we have this is a place that we feel a great affinity with you. Not at NextThought, but Ken and I certainly do. We're happy to help you in any way. We're not looking, so to be very clear, Ken Wilmer says we're not looking for any kind of vendor partnership here. That's not what we do. We love learning. We believe in your mission, and we're happy to help you in any way. So we're always happy to come back. If there's some particular extension of this with a particular program or course you want us to look at, we're happy to do that as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
There's some scones too.
Yeah. Take food, take scones, and if you would like these slides, please email me and I'll get those to you. Thank you so much for coming.
Nice to see you all. It's fun.
Thank you for